The wind howled across the crags of Mount Doom, a dry and bitter breath that carried with it the ash of countless years. Smoke coiled from the fissures, painting the sky in bruised gray, and beneath it all, the trembling steps of the ring-bearer echoed faintly on the black stone. Frodo stumbled forward, his strength spent, his heart pounding with an echo not his own. Beside him, Samwise Gamgee, wearied but unbroken, helped his master along the final slope, and before them loomed the threshold of the cracks of doom, where the fire of the mountain roared in a voice older than memory. The ring was heavy, not only on the chain about Frodo's neck, but within his very soul. Each step forward felt like a betrayal, each breath laden with guilt and something more, a pull that clawed at his mind, soothing and coaxing. It was not merely power that tempted him now, nor vengeance, nor greed. It was weariness, the promise of release, and the illusion of rest. Behind them, as if summoned by some dark tether, the broken figure of Golum had crept after them through stone and shadow. His eyes gleamed, even in the gloom, wide and fevered, fixed upon Frodo with desperation beyond madness. Gollum's limbs shook with suppressed yearning, and his fingers twitched with phantom weight. For a moment he hesitated, crouched near the entrance to the Sammath Nor, as if daring not to cross some unseen line. But his hunger for the precious was stronger than any fear. Frodo paused at the edge of the fire. The heat licked at him, not burning his flesh, but seeking something deeper. He felt as though the very air was breathing, watching, waiting. Sam steadied him. "We're here, Mr. Frodo," he whispered, not as a call to action, but as a prayer. A reminder. Frodo reached for the chain and slowly pulled the ring into his palm. It pulsed there, alive with firelight, perfect and smooth and terrible. His hand trembled. "I cannot do this," he murmured, though not to Sam. His eyes remained fixed upon the ring. "I cannot destroy it." Sam's breath caught. For a moment, he said nothing. Then his voice broke, raw with grief and fear. "But you have to. We're here. You brought it all this way. You can know," Frodo said, and now his voice was firmer, clearer than it had been in days. "I will not destroy it. Not because I am too weak, not because it has conquered me. I choose not to destroy it, because it is not mine to destroy." He turned, slowly, and looked into the shadows behind him. "Come out, Smeagol." The twisted creature crept forward, every movement unsure, his wide eyes blinking as if uncomprehending. "You want it," Frodo said softly, "and I cannot carry it any longer." Golum crawled closer, inching across the stone like a spider unsure of its prey. His mouth worked silently, his body quivering. "Take it," Frodo said, and he extended the ring toward him, palm open, trembling fingers barely clinging to it. Sam let out a cry, a wordless protest, and started forward. But Frodo raised a hand to stop him. He did not look away from Golum. "You were meant to have it. In some terrible way, it was always meant for you." Golum stared at the ring, as though he did not dare believe his eyes. Then, slowly, reverently, he reached out his clawed hands. His fingers touched the ring, and he gasped, as if it burned, or perhaps blessed him. He drew it from Frodo's hand with a hiss of breath, clutching it to his chest and crooning low. "My precious, my love, mine, Frodo sagged backward, his body buckling, and Sam caught him. The heat pressed against them, the roar of the fire growing louder, but the world seemed suspended. Golum turned away from them, stepping toward the edge of the chasm, whispering to the ring. He held it aloft, gazing into it, and then he stopped. He turned back to them, his eyes gleaming strangely, not with madness, not with hate, but with something new. "Thank you, Master, Frodo. Thank you, The voice was trembling, almost childlike. He backed slowly toward the fire, still clutching the ring. But he did not seem to notice the crumbling stone beneath his feet. Sam moved to rush forward, to stop him, but Frodo held him fast. "Let him go," Frodo whispered. "Let him decide." Golum paused at the brink. The heat licked at his back, smoke curling around him. For one heartbeat, he stood there, whole and still. Then he looked down into the fire, the ring clutched to his heart, and his face twisted not in pain, but in sorrow. "Had it once," he said softly, almost as if to himself. "I had it, and I lost it. And now, He turned his head toward Frodo, and his eyes were clear. "Now I give it back." Without another word, Golum threw himself forward into the fire. The ring flashed in the air, gleaming one last time, and then was gone. The mountain screamed. A great cry of agony and release echoed through the chambers of stone, and the fire surged higher, consuming all. The tower trembled, the rock split, and the sky above darkened with a fury-long bound. Frodo and Sam were thrown to the ground as the chamber shook. Rocks fell, the platform cracked, and the air turned to thunder. But it was done. The ring was gone. For a long time Frodo lay still, the heat of the mountain fading, the sound of the fire dimming to a lull. Sam held him close, shielding him with his body, weeping quietly. And when at last the light broke through the choking clouds, and the wind shifted, they knew they had survived. Gandalf came with the eagles, great wings slicing the smoke, and he lifted them from the ruin of the mountain. As the fires of Mount Doom collapsed behind them, and the shadow in the east fled like a dream at sunrise, they rose into the air, weightless, free. Frodo awoke in the fields of Ithilien. The air was sweet, the sky blue, and he lay beneath a canopy of green, birdsong weaving through the gentle breeze. He turned his head and saw Sam beside him, watching. "You did it, Mr. Frodo," Sam said softly. "No," Frodo answered. "We did it, and so did he." The days that followed were filled with joy and sorrow. Both the realm of Sauron had fallen, his armies scattered, and peace began to bloom across the scarred lands. Aragorn was crowned King of Gondor, and the White Tree blossomed once more in the courts of stone. Merry and Pippin returned as heroes, their laughter a balm to a world still mending, and Samwise Gamgee walked beside his master, silent and steadfast, even as the shadow in Frodo's heart remained. For Frodo had not cast the ring into the fire. He had not overcome it by strength or will. He had given it away, and that choice haunted him. He could still see Gollum's face in the firelight, hear the last words spoken with a clarity that defied forgetting. "Now, I give it back." In that moment, Frodo had glimpsed the weight of mercy and the terrible beauty of redemption. But it came at a cost. Though the world was saved, Frodo found no peace within himself. The wound on his shoulder ached with the memory of the Morgul blade, and darker still was the scar left by the ring. His nights were troubled, his heart restless. He stayed in the Shire for a time, walking the green hills, watching Sam marry and raise a child, tending to small things that once would have brought him joy. But the peace he had fought for seemed to belong to others, and so, when the time came, he sailed from the Grey Havens, the sea wind in his hair, the memory of fire behind him, and as the shores of Middle-earth faded into mist, Frodo closed his eyes and thought of Gollum not as an enemy, not even as a victim, but as a soul reclaimed from the edge. It was not a victory forged in battle or glory. It was a triumph of mercy, and that, at the end of all things, was enough. The sea stretched vast and silver beneath the bow of the ship, a glimmering plain without end or edge. Frodo stood alone at the prow, the wind lifting his curls as the light of the setting sun bled across the horizon. Somewhere far behind him lay the shores of Middle-earth, the green hills of the Shire fading now into the folds of memory. Ahead lay the Undying Lands, cloaked in mystery and promise, a place spoken of in hushed reverence, though none could say what peace or healing truly awaited there. Frodo did not know what he hoped to find, only that he had given all he could, and what remained of him was not meant for that world any longer. In the days before he left, the White City had glowed with celebration. Banners flew from every tower, the streets rang with songs both old and new, and the people had called out the names of their heroes. Aragorn had been crowned with the winged crown of Elendil, his hands healing the wounded, his gaze strong and sorrowful all at once. The hobbits had stood beside him, garbed in fine raiment they never would have imagined back in Hobbiton, and the people of Gondor had knelt before them in thanks. But Frodo had felt like a shadow moving through it all, smiling for their sake, laughing when he could, though the laughter never seemed to reach his chest. Gandalf had said little in those days. He watched Frodo with a quiet, knowing sadness, as if he understood without needing to speak. When Frodo finally told him that he could not remain in the Shire, Gandalf only nodded. Some wounds run too deep for healing in the lands that bore them. It was Sam who took it the hardest. Sam, who had walked with him through shadow and fire, who had carried him when he could no longer crawl. Sam, whose garden bloomed again with life, whose daughter Elena had golden hair that caught the sun just like the mallow leaves in Lothlorien. On the day of Frodo's departure, Sam had walked with him all the way to the Grey Havens, silent until the last. "I would have gone with you, if I could," he said then, eyes wet and unashamed. "But you don't need me anymore. Not where you're going." Frodo held him for a long time before he let go. Now, as the waves broke gently along the hull, and the wind hummed low, Frodo closed his eyes and allowed himself to feel the weight lifting. Not the ring's weight, it was long gone. cast into the fire by mercy rather than wrath, but the deeper ache, the burden of survival, of having made the choice he did. The ring had never been truly his. He knew that now. It had passed from East to Golum, to Bilbo, to himself. Each link in the chain forged anew by desire and chance. But when Frodo had stood at the edge of the fire, he had done something no other bearer had. He had relinquished it of his own accord. Not to destroy it, not to claim it, but to return it to the one who had been bound to it longest. In that moment, he had not seen a monster. He had seen a soul caged in hunger, trembling on the precipice of salvation or ruin. That Golum had chosen to end the story himself was something Frodo still could not name. Redemption, perhaps, or release. The end of the long madness. It had not been Frodo's strength that destroyed the ring, nor Sam's love, nor the might of Gondor, or the elves of old. It had been Gollum's decision, born of Frodo's mercy. What would the world have said, had they known that the victory of the free peoples came not from swords or armies, but from pity? The lands had changed quickly in the wake of Sauron's fall. The Black Gate was thrown down, Barad-dûr collapsed into ruin, and the enslaved creatures of Mordor scattered like smoke on the wind. Some fled to the east, beyond the reach of the west. Others remained, confused and broken, their minds unshackled. For the first time in ages, orcs wandered aimlessly through the forests of Ithilien, snarling and afraid, no longer guided by the will that had bound them. Trolls turned on one another, their rage impotent without a master. The Nazgul had been torn from the world, their rings useless, their master gone. Yet peace did not come all at once. Aragorn, as King Elisor, sent envoys and aid to the ruined lands. He bid his people to rebuild not only their own cities, but to heal what they could in the east. Some said it was foolish, others noble. But he remembered the pain of the ring in Frodo's eyes, and sought to honor the mercy that had saved them all. The elven realms began to fade more swiftly. Luth lost its shimmer, and even Rivendell dimmed. The age of men had truly begun. Legolas lingered for a time in Ithilien, planting trees where fire had scarred the hills. Before at last building his ship and sailing after Frodo, Gimli went with him, the first and only dwarf to tread the undying lands, out of love and loyalty. And Sam remained in the Shire. He wrote the Red Book, carefully recording Frodo's journey as it was told to him, though some pages bore lines that no one else could understand. At night, he would sometimes stare out across the western sky, and when the breeze carried a scent of salt or strange blossoms, he would wonder what Frodo was doing, whether he had found peace, or whether the pain had merely taken new form. In Valinor, Frodo lived not as a hero, nor as a legend. The elves received him with kindness, but without fanfare. He walked among them as one walks among ancient trees, humbled and quiet. He spent long hours in silence, sitting by pools of starlit water or beneath trees whose leaves never withered. His shoulders ceased to ache, slowly, and his dreams were no longer filled with fire. But still, there remained within him a space shaped like the ring, a quiet void, neither cruel nor empty, but permanent. In time, he found himself drawn to the Tower of Niana, the Lady of Tears, who wept not for sorrow alone, but for healing. There Frodo listened to the stories of others who had come through grief. He did not speak often, but when he did, his words carried weight. It was said among the elves that Frodo Baggins was not merely a ring-bearer, but something rarer still, a soul who had chosen another's salvation over his own. One evening, long after the stars had emerged, Frodo sat beneath a silver tree whose roots reached into the sea. A figure approached, tall, cloaked, yet familiar. Bilbo. The old hobbit smiled. Older still, his hair white as foam, but his eyes bright. "Well, my boy," he said, sitting beside him. "It seems we've come a long way." They sat in silence for a while. Then Bilbo chuckled softly. "You did what I never could, what none of us could. You let it go." Frodo turned to him, surprised. "I thought you had." Bilbo shook his head gently. "I gave it away. Yes, but not truly. It clung to me in dreams, in thoughts. Even here, I feel it sometimes. But you let it go to someone else. You trusted him." Frodo looked to the waves, the wind carrying the scent of salt and light blossoms. "He needed it," Frodo said. "More than I did. And do you regret it?" Frodo was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded, slowly. "Sometimes. But not because it was wrong." Bilbo leaned back and watched the stars flicker. "That's the thing about mercy, lad. It never feels grand when you do it. Just quiet, soft. But it changes the world all the same." They remained there until the moon crested the horizon. a white sail upon the sea. Elsewhere, in Middle-earth, songs were sung for ages to come about the fall of the Dark Lord and the bravery of the small folk who toppled him, but few knew the truth of that final moment. Fewer still understood its weight. And yet, in quiet glades, and beside murmuring brooks, some told the story differently. They said that at the end of all things, a hobbit offered mercy, and a creature, long lost, found his way home. And perhaps that was the truest ending of all. In the timeless land across the sea, where no shadow of evil could thrive, and the light of the two trees yet lived on, in the breath of the air and the gleam of the waters, Frodo found that healing did not arrive as thunder or flame, or in any sudden unraveling of pain. It came slowly, as the sea wears down stone into sand, as frost recedes from the fields when spring breathes. The fire inside him, the fire of the ring that had bound him to a path of horror and burden, had been extinguished in the mountain, but the smoke remained, coiling through his thoughts and curling in his dreams. He spent his days walking the gardens of Lorien, not the Lorien he had once visited in Middle-earth, but the elder Lorien, the undying reflection of that realm, a dream given shape. He would walk among trees whose bark glowed faintly with light, under flowers that chimed when touched by the wind. The air itself sang of beginnings, and he sometimes wept without knowing why. He did not dream in sleep here. He remembered instead, each memory unfolding like pages in a worn book, and though many were still touched with pain, there was clarity in them now, and stillness. Gandalf came to him often, no longer cloaked in gray or white, but in a robe woven from the light of stars. He had shed the final remnant of his earthly mission, yet his gaze was gentle, no less wise, and when he spoke, it was as a friend rather than a guide. They would walk together in silence through the meadows of Valinor, Gandalf sometimes humming an old tune that Frodo could never quite place in time. Frodo began to write again, not to record the events of the War of the Ring. Those pages had already been penned, both by his hand and by Sam's, but to speak of the other story, the story not told, of Golum, of the mercy given, of the cost. He wrote slowly, not as a scholar but as one trying to capture truth, with hands still trembling. Some nights he would wake with a thought, and he would light a single candle in his chamber and set ink to parchment, recording things he had not realized he remembered. One evening, while sitting upon a hill that looked down into the sea, Frodo was joined by Golum. She moved without sound, as if she belonged to the wind itself, and her eyes bore the reflection of stars not yet born. "You have begun to see," she said softly, "what lies beneath the act." He nodded, his hands resting upon his knees. "I thought I would be healed here," he said. "Whole. But I do not feel whole. I feel lighter, as if something has gone out of me. But what remains isn't myself, not fully." Galadriel tilted her head, listening. "Wholeness," she said, "is not always the return to what was. Sometimes it is the remaking of what is, through grief, through endurance, and through mercy. You gave away something no one else ever could, the right to claim vengeance." Frodo turned his eyes to the west, where the light dimmed in hues of soft silver and fading rose. Was it pity or weakness? Galadriel smiled, not kindly, not coldly, but with the quiet reverence of one who knew sorrow. Deeply. It was strength, she said, the kind only the broken can offer. The world was saved not by power, nor by knowledge, nor by might, but by a single hand offering what it feared most: trust. And Frodo, though his heart still ached, began to believe her. Bilbo passed in the spring of the next year. He had grown quieter and gentler in the end, and when he lay down upon his bed of white blossoms in the House of Rest, it was with a smile and a poem on his lips. Frodo was with him, holding his hand, and as Bilbo breathed his last, a great peace settled upon the chamber. The elves sang a lament for him, soft and high and pure, and when the wind carried it into the sky, some said it echoed all the way to the borders of the mortal world, like a song remembered from childhood. After Bilbo's passing, Frodo wandered for a time, not in grief, though he missed his old cousin dearly, but in contemplation. He visited the shores where the first elves had landed. He walked through valleys where Javanna had planted the earliest trees. He sat beneath stars older than art, and there, at last, he began to understand. The ring had been more than an artifact. It had been a mirror, and all who bore it saw themselves within it, twisted, magnified, made monstrous or divine. But by giving it to Golum, Frodo had refused that reflection. He had stepped outside the cycle, and because of that, the world had shifted. One day, many years later, or no time at all, for time passed differently, in the West, Frodo met Sam again. He came across the sea, old but not frail. His hands still stained with the good brown soil of the Shire. His eyes as warm and full of sun as ever. They embraced without words, tears falling freely, and for a time, it was as if nothing had passed between them. "I knew I'd find you," Sam said, when at last they spoke. "I knew it, and I hoped you would," Frodo whispered, his voice full of quiet wonder. Together, they walked to Silver Shores, and Frodo felt, for the first time since he had held the ring, a kind of peace that did not ache. Back in Middle-earth, the tale of the ring faded into legend. The great towers of Gondor still stood, and the white tree bore fruit. The elves had mostly departed, though some remained for a while, guiding men through the early years of their new dominion. Aragorn ruled wisely for many years, his name spoken with reverence across lands, both free and once conquered. Eowyn and Faramir healed together, their love growing like new grass after fire. Gimli led a company of dwarves to a Glarind, the glittering caves and carved wonders that outlasted even the memory of war. Legolas sailed at last, and songs were sung of the green boat with a banner shaped like a malern leaf, borne upon foam like the dreams of Elbereth. But though the ring was gone, its memory lingered in other ways. Scholars in Minas Tirith debated the true ending of the war. Some believed Frodo cast a ring into the fire. Others claimed it was stolen and lost. Few accepted the tale that Golum had been given the ring freely. Fewer still believed it was that act which saved them all. And yet, the tale was told. In the Green Dragon, on stormy nights, in the library halls of Minas Tirith, in the forests of Ithilien, beneath the new trees planted by Legolas's hand, the story was whispered, of mercy, of choice, of a small figure standing in the firelight, extending his hand not in wrath, but in hope. A century passed. Then two, then more. The Fourth Age turned, and men forgot much of what had come before. But in the deepest glens of old forests, where light flickered through ancient boughs, and the water ran clear and cold, some said you could still feel the memory of that mercy. A hush in the leaves, a pause in the wind, and in Valinor, in a house of quiet stone near the sea, an old hobbit sat beside a lamp carved from pearl. He no longer wrote. He no longer needed to. He watched the waves and listened to the silence. And in that silence, he heard the echo of a choice made long ago. He saw Gollum's face, peaceful at last, falling into flame not with horror, but with acceptance. He saw Sam's face, weary and brave. He saw Gandalf's smile, Bilbo's hand, Aragorn's crown, Galadriel's eyes. He saw the road he had walked, and the one he had not. And for the first time in all his days, Frodo Baggins understood not only why he had been chosen, but why he had endured. Not to be a hero, not to bear the burden alone, but to prove that even in the darkest moment, the smallest light, freely given, could remake the world. The sun never set in Valinor as it did in Middle-earth, but it changed, waxing and waning, casting light that deepened into gold, then into pearl, then into a soft twilight that seemed to come from within the world rather than above it. In that perpetual turning, time passed gently. Trees never withered, songs never faded. Pain became distant, softened not by forgetfulness, but by understanding. For Frodo Baggins, bearer of the One Ring, that understanding unfolded as slowly and intricately as the petals of a night-blooming flower. He walked the shoreline often in those days, barefoot across silver sands that sparkled faintly in the light of the trees. The sound of the sea calmed the weight he still sometimes carried in his chest. Though the ring was gone, its echo lived in him, not as shadow or torment now, but as memory that carried its own rhythm, like a heartbeat, like a song unfinished. But it no longer ached. It sang. One morning, beneath a sky lit in hues of rose and moonstone, Frodo met Elrond upon the high hills that overlooked the westernmost cliffs. The Elf Lord had come not as ruler or healer, but as one who too had chosen departure, whose burdens had been both personal and profound. "You've grown quieter," Elrond said. After a long silence shared between them, Frodo smiled faintly. The words, "I used to carry," no longer press against my ribs. "That is a good sign," it is, Frodo said. "But sometimes I wonder if silence means peace, or simply that I have nothing more to say." Elrond gazed out across the endless sea. Sometimes they are the same thing. They stood there a while, the breeze moving gently through the cloaks at their backs. Then Elrond turned to him with a gaze that pierced yet comforted. "There is something I must show you." Frodo followed, descending through winding paths of white stone and flowering trees, until they came to a place Frodo had never seen before. A grove tucked into the hills, its trees pale and slender, crowned with gold-veined leaves. At the center was a pool, round as a mirror, perfectly still. "This is not Galadriel's mirror," Elrond said. "It does not show the future or the past. It shows what might have been." Frodo hesitated at the edge, heart suddenly restless. Why would anyone want to see that? To understand the weight of choice. The reflection in the pool shimmered, and Frodo beheld a vision of the fire chamber once more. But in this version, he did not extend the ring to Golum. He turned from him. The ring remained clutched in his hand, his face hardened. Sam called out. Golum sprang upon them. A struggle, a fall, and the ring, lost in the flames by force, not will. The mountain erupted. Golum vanished. The same ending. On the surface, but the vision lingered. Frodo and Sam escaping. Yes, Sauron destroyed. Yes, but Frodo's face bore a different expression in the days that followed. Haunted, not by pain, but by shame. A face that never quite met Sam's again. A face that carried victory as defeat. He stepped back from the pool, breath quick. "It would have worked," he said. "It would have ended the same." "Not the same," Elrond said. "Evil was vanquished either way. But mercy and redemption, those only came through your choice. In the other path, the ring was lost. In yours, it was released. There is a difference, Frodo, and the world is not the same for it." He nodded, quietly. "It is a hard thing," Elrond continued, "to offer mercy to those who seem least deserving. It wounds more deeply than wrath. But it is also the one power Sauron never understood. And that is why he fell." Frodo thanked him, and they parted in peace. Years passed in vain. Though time no longer touched Frodo as it once had, he wrote occasionally, sat beneath starlight, listened to elven music drifting on air like perfume. Sam was with him often, tending a small garden of Shire herbs he'd brought in secret. Together they would share tea, sometimes in silence, sometimes recalling the old days. "You remember the fireworks at Bilbo's last birthday?" Sam would laugh, eyes glinting. "Or the look on your face when the elves first sang on the road to Rivendell?" And Frodo would laugh, too. Sometimes softly, sometimes until tears came. They had lost so much, but not everything. One day, Frodo awoke with a sense of lightness he had not felt since before the ring had come into his life. He rose, dressed simply, and walked to the sea. The sky was clear, the horizon a silver thread. He sat for a long while, watching the waves, the tide lifting and falling like the breath of the world. A figure sat beside him, though he had not heard footsteps. He turned. It was Golum, or rather Smeagol whole, clear-eyed, unmarred by hunger or pain. He was clothed in white, his hands uncurled, his face aged, but kind, not twisted, not broken. Frodo said nothing. He merely reached out his hand. Smeagol took it. They sat there together as the sea spoke its ancient tongue, and Frodo felt no fear. Whether it was vision or visitation, he did not know. But it did not matter. "Thank you, Smeagol," said his voice light as a wind on water. "Thank you for letting me be me again." Frodo nodded, tears sliding silently down his cheeks. "I am sorry," he said at last, "for what we did to you, for not seeing you sooner." "You saw me," Smeagol replied, "when it mattered." He faded then, not in pain or shadow, but like mist when the sun rises. And Frodo felt a deep warmth settle into his bones. Not fire, not burden, but light. Later that evening, as the stars rose, Frodo sat with Sam and told him of the vision. "Do you think he's truly at peace now?" Sam asked. "I think he found what none of us could give him in life," Frodo answered, "and maybe that's what this place is for. To finish the stories that were left incomplete." They sat in silence. Two hobbits beneath alien stars, hearts full of sorrow and gratitude. And somewhere, far away, the world turned. Generations passed. In Middle-earth, the kingdoms of men flourished. New cities were built. Old wounds healed. But the memory of the ring remained in the deep places. In libraries, in lullabies, in stone runes, carved on distant cliffs. Its story was retold, always with awe, sometimes with fear, but never again with desire. One such telling happened many ages hence. In a little house tucked into a green hollow at the edge of the Eastfold, a mother told her daughter the story of the hobbit who climbed the mountain, not to fight, not to win, but to give away what all others would have kept. The daughter listened, wide-eyed, and at the end, asked why he had done it. Because, her mother said, sometimes the only way to break a curse is to offer grace. The girl thought about that for a long time. Did the hobbit ever come home? He did, the mother said, but not to where he began. He came home to peace. And in the end, that was enough. Back in Valinor, Frodo aged slowly, his hair silvering gently, his hands growing steadier, not weaker. He gardened, he wrote letters to no one, folded into bottles and released into the sea. Sam aged beside him, and when the time came, Sam departed quietly, leaving a letter of his own. "Thank you," it said, "for showing me the way," Frodo mourned. But he did not despair. He spent his final days in the Tower of Nienna, surrounded by song and silence. The lady herself visited him only once, placing her hand on his brow. He slept then for a long time, and when he awoke, he found that the burden he had once borne had become a bridge. He was not the hobbit he had been. He would never be that again. But he was more than the bearer of sorrow. He was the bearer of choice. On his final day, Frodo walked once more to the edge of the sea. He stood alone as the tide came in, eyes fixed on the horizon. He did not speak. He did not weep. He simply stepped into the water, and where he walked, the waves parted like leaves. And as he vanished into the silver deep, the wind carried his name not as a cry of mourning, but as a song of mercy. Frodo, bearer of light, breaker of chains, friend of the fallen. And the world, though it turned as ever, turned a little softer because of him. The years after the fall of Sauron came to be known as the Blossom Century, when the white tree of Gondor bloomed thrice in a single year, and the fields of Ithilien turned gold with blossoms unknown since the days before the darkness. Yet peace, though long and fertile, is never a gift given once and forever. It is a garden that must be tended, and in the far corners of the world, seeds of unrest still took root in silence. The city of Minas Tirith rose in splendor under the reign of King Elisar. Marble gleamed again. The archives were restored, and the Hall of Kings was carved anew, with the likenesses of not only men, but elves, dwarves, and hobbits. The names of Frodo, Samwise, Meriadoc, and Peregrine were inscribed in runes of gold, at the base of the great fountain where the white tree stood. And yet, even in the City of Kings, stories faded, softened into poetry. And the deeper truths of mercy and sacrifice became tangled with myth. It was during the 91st year of Elios's reign that the first signs of change were seen. A black plume rose in the east, not vast nor menacing as before, but strange contained, stubborn, as though a fire had been lit that refused to die. Travelers reported the reappearance of symbols in lost ruins, circles within circles, scratched with iron into stone. In the markets of Herod, whispers spread of a new cult rising, not devoted to Morgoth or Sauron, but to something older, a forgotten name from before the shaping of the world. Elisar sent emissaries, then soldiers. Few returned. At the same time, a stirring occurred in the dreams of men. Elanna Gardner, daughter of Samwise, now grown with children of her own, woke often with the same vision, a river of light, choked with ash, and a voice calling her name not in terror, but in pleading. She wrote to King Elisar, as her father had taught her, and her letter reached the citadel in the hands of a ranger. Elisar read it in silence and summoned Faramir, steward of Gondor, now aged but wise beyond reckoning. She dreams with the insight of the ring-bearers, Faramir said, like her father before her. This is no common dream. Do you believe the danger is real? I believe the world does not forget its wounds, nor the hands that wielded healing. Elinor was summoned to Minas Tirith, where she arrived clad in a simple green cloak, her golden hair bound in a braid, and her eyes clear as dawn. She met the king not as a subject, but as a friend's daughter, and when she bowed, it was with grace learned from the elves of Rivendell, whom she had visited in her youth with her father. I do not understand the dream, she told Elisar, but I feel it pulling me, like a thread caught on a thorn. The king asked her what she would do. I would follow it. She said, "So be it," said Eleazar, placing a hand on her brow. "Then let your path be blessed with the names of those who walked before Frodo, Samwise, Galadriel, Gandalf. Let the mercy of the ring-bearer guide you." Elena departed 2 weeks later with a company of 6. Tolman, a young captain of Gondor, Lyrien, a scholar from Dol Amroth, who spoke many tongues, Baragon's grandson Halward, who bore his grandfather's sword, a healer of Rohan, named Idrik, and a grey-cloaked elf named Moelian, one of the last born before the fading of Loth. Their journey took them eastward, along forgotten roads, and over river crossings, where old cairns whispered the names of dead kings. In Ron, they found the land changed. Where once had been ruin and servitude, now villages had risen again. But their people spoke little, their eyes wary. Some bore marks upon their palms burned in sigils of concentric circles, crude and fresh. A priesthood moved among them, cloaked in copper and red, chanting in a tongue that made the air feel brittle. It was Melian who first heard the old word spoken. Caridin, not a name we know, said Lyrine, frowning. Nor is it in the Elvish tongue. Is older, Melian said. Not Sindarin, not Goenya, older even than the dark speech. A ruined temple, near the Sea of Ron, held the next sign. Upon its cracked walls was painted a scene, a vast eye, not wreathed in fire, but ringed with tears. Beneath it, a figure hunched and hollow, holding a ring that dripped blood into the earth, and behind the figure, a shadow with no face and many arms. Reaching, Lyrine wept to look upon it. It is a memory, she said, not of something that was, but something that might have been. A reflection. Ilana stood before the mural in silence, then turned away. We must go farther, she said. To the mountains beyond the sea. There, among broken stone and wind-scraped valleys, they found the wellspring of the dreams. A cave mouth, black and deep. From it issued a low hum, almost imperceptible, like the heartbeat of the mountain itself. Inside, the walls were carved with spirals, repeating and shifting, and deeper still. They found a chamber where the air shimmered strangely, and time felt stretched thin. Elena stepped forward alone. The chamber opened into a dome of rock, at the center of which was a pool perfectly still, black as polished obsidian. As she approached, the surface of the water rippled, and an image formed, not of the past, not of the future, but of Frodo. He stood in the fire chamber, once more holding the ring out to Golum, not with fear, not with struggle, but with peace. Then the image flickered, changed, and showed Frodo seated in Valinor, writing with a calm hand, while Smeagol stood nearby, whole and weeping. Then again it changed him, tending to a Shire garden, Elena at his feet, and a whisper carried over all of it, the world remembers mercy. Elena knelt beside the pool and wept, not in sorrow, but in recognition. When she arose, the chamber was silent. A new presence had entered the mountain, not evil, not divine, but something born of deep memory. A voice spoke from the walls, soft and ringing, without shape. You carry the light of a choice made in fire. Who are you? Elena whispered. We are what remains when mercy rewrites fate. The pool shivered. Then the voice was gone. Elena and her companions returned west. Changed, they bore no treasures, no enemies vanquished. But across the lands they passed through, they planted small white seeds in the soil of every village. Seeds that bloomed into pale star-shaped flowers. Where they grew, the dreams of fear ceased, and the marks on men's palms faded. When Elena returned to Gondor, she was met with wonder, but no great fanfare. She asked only that one sentence be added to the record kept in the Hall of the Ring-Bearers. Let mercy be remembered, not only as an ending, but as a beginning. Years passed, she grew old. The tree her father had planted in Bag End reached its full height, and beneath it, Elena often sat with her children, telling stories, but she never forgot the vision, or the voice in the mountain. And in the end, when her own time came, and her family stood by her bed, Elena smiled and said the same words her father had once written. At the end of the Red Book, I am glad you are with me. Here at the end of all things, and the world, which had been saved once by mercy, breathed gently, ready to begin again. Long after the blossom of Gondor faded into its summer years and the Fourth Age neared its quiet middle, the world had grown large again. Kingdoms expanded into lands once wild. Stone towers rose where wolves once howled. The language of the West spread into Herod and beyond. And the ancient forests that had resisted the voice of men now gave way to roads, to trade, to treaties. The wild things retreated not in battle, but in silence. And so did many of the stories. Elena Gardner passed into legend, known in the East as the White Daughter, the one who turned the Black Pool to mirror. Her descendants flourished, some remaining in the Shire, some wandering far. One, a boy named Theron, inherited her eyes green-ringed with gold and bore within him a restless longing he could never name. He was not of royal blood, not noble, and yet dreams clung to him as mist to the barrows of the North Downs. He saw cities of light swallowed by ash, rivers that ran backwards, mountains with open mouths. He heard voices in a tongue never spoken aloud, and always the same sound followed the faintest song, barely sung, but pulsing with meaning. Theron grew beneath the boughs of the trees that Samwise had once planted. Now older than any man alive, he studied the Red Book, though many now called it folklore. His village had long since forgotten that the tales had roots in truth. The ring, they said, was a symbol. Golum, a cautionary tale. Frodo, a name for courage, whispered to children afraid of the dark. But Theron believed. He traveled to Rivendell, or what remained of it. The house of Elrond was empty now, overtaken by vines, but not ruined. It was a place of stillness, and in its library, he found a scroll, sealed with wax, long hardened, bore the sigil of Galadriel, a star woven into a leaf. He opened it beneath the moon. It was a map, not of the west, not of the known world, but of the deep east, beyond the red waste, where no tales returned, and no stars were known to match those of the sky above Middle-earth. A land said to be unmade, or forgotten, or both. The scroll bore no instructions, only a single line written in a hand he did not know. The last choice waits beyond memory. Theron did not question. He packed a bag of herbs and parchment, a blade he would never draw, and the red book copied in his own hand. He wore a silver pendant, left to him by his mother, shaped like a star with a single green gem in its center. He did not tell his village goodbye. Some journeys begin not with farewells, but with silence. He traveled first through Gondor, now a vast realm of learning and lore. Its great cities bore towers where crystal lenses mapped the stars. He visited the archives in Minas, which now reached 5 levels below the earth, carved in black stone and lit by flame that danced without smoke. He asked questions no one could answer. What lies beyond the red waste? The archivists shook their heads. That land does not exist. Or if it did, it no longer does. But Theron saw doubt in their eyes. He left before they could ask why he cared. He traveled south into Herod, where heat rose like breath from the dunes. The people there still remembered Alana. Her name was kept by a small order of silent monks who traced spirals in the sand, believing them to be echoes of an ancient mercy that still unfolded. They offered Theron water and shelter, but no guidance. All they said was, "The east of ours roads. Step with purpose." It was in the 52nd day of his eastward journey, when the stars overhead began to shift, and the birds fell silent, that Theron crossed into the place that had no name. The land did not greet him as the others had. There were no ruins, no cairns, no markings of the world before. The sky hung lower, and the wind smelled not of salt or rot or rain, but of iron and stone, as if the bones of the earth were exposed. Trees grew in tangled masses, and the rivers ran in braids like silver hair across the rock. He did not dream when he slept, or if he did, he never remembered. He found signs eventually not of life, but of order. Circles carved in stone. Spiral glyphs, always the same symbol, etched shallowly in surfaces half swallowed by moss and frost. At last, after nearly a year, he reached a cliff that looked out over a vast basin of glass. Not water, but stone made molten and cool than old scar. In the center stood a tower, black and narrow, too smooth for the hand of men. It bore no door, no window, but a narrow slit of darkness at its base. He entered without thought. Inside, the air was still. A spiral stair rose along the inner wall, vanishing into lightless heights. Theron climbed. Steps echoed not outward but inward, as if the sound turned back on itself. At the summit, he found a room empty except for a pedestal, and upon it, a circle of silver, suspended in glass. It was not a ring, that it was a mirror. Theron looked within, and saw not his face, but 1,000 faces, not people, but choices, each flickering like candlelight in a storm. Frodo offering the ring, Golum weeping, Sam weeping, Galadriel turning away, Boromir falling, Faramir refusing, Bilbo sparing, and others' choices, not made, or not remembered. The mirror pulsed, and then the voice spoke not in words, but in knowing. "You are the memory." Theron knelt. "Why me?" "Because you remember." "What must I do?" "Nothing, or everything. You may carry this, or leave it. But know this, the world forgets. You are here to remind it." Theron rose, took the mirror, and felt no weight. He returned west in silence. Years passed as days. And when he arrived at the White City, older, quiet, the people asked who he was. He said only, "A student of mercy." He carried the mirror, not as a relic, but as a tale. And in every village he visited, he told the true story of the ring that was given, of the creature redeemed, of the world saved, not by strength, but by surrender. He told it simply, as Frodo might have, and in the telling, the world remembered again, understood. We now enter the longest and most mythic chapter, yet exceeding 45,000 characters, and carrying this tale from personal legacy into the foundations of a new age. This part moves beyond Eleanor's line and Theron's quest delving into the deep future of Middle-earth, a time when stories themselves have become power, and the act of remembering reshapes the fate of the world. This is the dawn of the Fifth Age, the Age of Echoes. It began, as all endings do, with silence. 3 centuries had passed since Theron returned from the Deep East, bearing the mirror that was not a ring, and the tale that was not a weapon. His journey had been sung in many tongues, but his story, unlike the stories of kings and towers and armies, was not carved into stone. It was told in breath and firelight, in the lull between battle and dream, passed from voice to voice like a flame that could not be held, only shared. And still, the world changed. In the north, the Shire had grown quiet. The rivers meandered differently now, and few remembered that once a king had passed by its borders in disguise. The trees Samwise had planted had become a forest all their own, not vast but ancient in feeling, and the land around them hummed with an old power no one could name. Children no longer knew the names of Frodo or Sam. They played games about dragons and Dunedain, but the ring was forgotten, or rather, remembered differently, as a riddle, a shape, a warning no longer tied to the truth. In Minas Tirith, the line of kings continued, though Eleazar and Arwen had long returned to the land beyond light. Their descendants bore the marks of both elf and man, long hands, deep eyes, and hearts full of conflict. In the 7th generation of their line was born a girl named Silmarion, whose name echoed back to the First Age, though none in her time remembered the lineage clearly. Silmarion was strange from birth. She spoke little, but listened always. When she was still a child, she walked beyond the walls of the White City and did not return for 6 days. When she was found, she was sitting beneath the white tree, now grown so vast its limbs brushed the stars, and she whispered to her nursemaid, "The tree remembers. It told me a name, Frodo." Her tutor laughed softly when told. Frodo, a hobbit's name, a tale of the Third Age. But Silmarion did not forget, and as she grew, she began to seek names in the hidden places of the world. She ventured into archives, not just in Minas Tirith, but in the sea halls of Pelargia, the wind vaults of Furnost rebuilt, and even into the underlibraries of Dol Amroth, where sea mages kept the whispers of the drowned. She found fragments, a letter from Faramir to an unnamed prince, describing a vision seen in Ithilien, of a flame not burning, but healing, a carving in the far south, older than Gondor, showing a creature with 2 faces, one snarling, one sorrowful, holding a silver ring and offering it to a star. A poem half lost in translation. In Mountain's fire, he chose to give, and so the world was taught to live. The hand that offered, not that took, wrote mercy in the sky's own book. Silmarion carried these fragments as others bore swords, and then, when she was 27, the stars changed. For a fortnight, the skies of Middle-earth shimmered red and silver, not in fire but in reflection, as if some unseen sea had risen between the heavens and the earth. Scholars argued. Seers wept. Farmers prayed. And in the deep woods of the north, animals fled in spirals, running in patterns never seen before. And in the great city of Minas Tirith, Silmarion had a dream. She stood upon a white field. Before her was not a tower, but a tree made of flame and water, its roots rising into the sky, its branches digging into the earth. Beneath it stood a figure small and cloaked, holding nothing. And from the figure's mouth came no speech, but a single note, soft and pure, carried on, a wind that did not move. She awoke, weeping. That same night, in the village of Eladar, near the eastern hills, a child was born. His parents were no one of note woodcutters, who lived by trade and silence, but the boy, called Callan, opened his eyes before he took his first breath. And in those eyes burned a memory too large for any mortal child to carry. By the time he was 3, he spoke in rhymes. By 5, he could name every plant in the valley. By 7, he had vanished. For years, no one knew where he had gone. His parents grew old, waiting, but Silmarion heard of it, and knew. He has gone to find what we have lost. She left the throne behind, not abandoned, but gifted to a cousin, who ruled with strength and humility, and set out once more, not alone. With her traveled scribes and singers, wanderers who remembered that tales are as vital as steel, and warriors who wore no sigil save a spiral etched into their blades. They became known, slowly, as the Order of the Echo. Not a kingdom, not a cult, but a movement. They passed through the world not as conquerors, but as questioners. They taught children to remember the names, not of kings, but of kindness, not of empires, but of choices. They walked the forgotten roads. They mended old wells. They carried the tale of Frodo, full and unglorified. And in the dark corners of the world, things stirred. In the south, a new city, rose black stone, copper roofs, and no names spoken. Its people did not smile. They bore the sigil of the broken spiral. They called themselves the Ashan. And they believed in forgetting. They burned books. They erased songs. They said the past was a prison, and only in forgetting could men be free. Their leader was never seen, but his voice rang out through stone horns built into the walls. We are the fire that unlearns. We are the cut that bleeds out memory. We are what follows mercy. Silmarillion marched to the city with the echo, not with swords, but with song. And before its gates, she read the red book aloud. It took 3 days. They stood in silence. Ash fell from the towers. The people of the city listened. And on the 4th day, a child opened the gate. Silmarillion walked inside. The city was not conquered. It was named. Callan was found within, now grown to a youth. His hair silver, though his skin was unlined. He carried the mirror of Theron, but it had changed. No longer silver glass, but woven light. It showed not faces, but decisions, not images, but intentions. Heat gave it to Silmarillion. You carry this now. I have become something else. What are you? She asked. I am the echo made flesh. I am what happens when a story is not forgotten. He turned and walked into the light, and was seen no more. Silmarillion carried the mirror to the white tree. She placed it beneath its boughs, and the blossoms fell upon it, and did not fade. And for the first time in ages, a star moved in the sky. Not fell. Moved. And a new tale began. Not of power, not of war, but of a world that remembered what mercy made possible. And in every home, on every tongue, Frodo's name was spoken, not with awe, but with gratitude. Because he gave. And so the world was given back. In the time beyond calendars and kings, when the lands of Middle-earth had been renamed so often that only the mountains still answered to their ancient titles, a city stood at the edge of the sky. It was not built with hands. It did not rise by mortar or decree. It gathered, slowly, from song and echo, from memory and mercy, shaped as mist is shaped by wind. Its name could not be written, for it changed with each telling, but its heart was constant. A tower of living light, grown from the soil of remembrance. They called it the Library of the Last Gift. It stood upon the shoulders of the world, far beyond the forests once called Fangorn, beyond the glittering waste that had swallowed Mordor, beyond even the deep east, where Theron had once walked. At its center, beneath a dome carved from time, floated the mirror of memory, once silver, then light, now breather, shifting lens through which the past was not only seen, but known. Few reached it. Fewer still were called, but all who arrived knew the name Frodo. His story had changed, not in content, but in understanding. Where once he had been seen as a bearer of doom, narrowly averted, he was now known as the Great Giver, the one who surrendered not only power, but himself, so that another might be free. His mercy had not merely saved the world. It had taught it how to survive. And still, his tale was incomplete, because in the 6th age, stories were alive. The scribes of the Last Gift were not historians but weavers. They gathered threads from every tongue, every memory, and bound them into the living tapestry that lined the tower's walls. There were no books, no pages, only strands of pure meaning, humming softly, adjusting with each new voice added. And it was said that when enough voices spoke the truth together, the past itself could shift, not to erase what had been, but to heal the wound left behind. Among the weavers was a woman called Illyarine, born of no line known, bearing eyes like twin moons, and hands that glowed faintly in darkness. She did not age. She did not sleep. She wove not with thread, but with presence, shaping strands of story into resonance. And it was she who first heard the voice beneath stone. It came not as sound, but vibration. A low pulse in the ground, barely noticed amid the mountain's heartbeat, but growing stronger with each passing season. Others dismissed it. A quake, a shift in magma, the breath of the world. But Illyarine knew better. She had been born in the ruins of Edoras, long since overgrown and forgotten, raised by descendants of Rohirrim, who still sang in stables and believed that to ride fast was to think clearly. She had come to the tower not for honor, but to find the name her mother had whispered before death. Golum. It was a name rarely spoken now. Among the Ashan, he was seen as a demon, the one who nearly undid the world. Among the Echo, he was a shadow beside Frodo's light. But Illyarine had always believed the truth to be more complicated. Frodo's mercy was made real only because Golum could still choose and choice. In the Sixth Age was the last magic. She followed the voice beneath the mountain, descending into the roots of the tower, where light no longer glowed and the air tasted of slate. There she found a chamber untouched by any hand. Inside was a pool, black as night, still as stone, not a mirror, a veiled and from its surface a shape rose small, hunched but whole. Eyes wide, mouth neither snarling nor smiling. It was not Golum, it was not Agol, it was the memory of the choice. Illyarine knelt. She placed her hand upon the veil, and in that moment, she saw everything. The ring, offered without demand. Golum, trembling not from hunger but wonder. The fire, waiting not to consume, but to witness. Frodo, for once, at peace. And behind it, all, the great secret no one had yet named. The ring was not destroyed by accident. It was undone by contradiction. By a will freely given to an unworthy soul, who, in being given, became worthy. The eye of Sauron had not simply fallen. It had been blinded by something it could not grasp. Grace. Ilia, Rien rose, and returned to the tower. She did not speak for 7 days. When she did, her voice echoed across the chamber, and retuned every tapestry. The age has not ended. Frodo's gift is not complete. The weavers gathered, the mirror pulsed, and the threads began to shift. The world responded. Far to the west. In the Grey Shore Valley, where the last ships had once sailed, a light flickered atop the oldest hill. It was not fire. It was invitation. A child followed it. His name was Ariel, and he bore the mark of none. His blood was mixed man, elf, dwarf, and something else. His laughter carried the pitch of bells not heard since Numenor. He walked barefoot through snow, and never felt cold. And when he touched the hill, it opened. Beneath it lay the chamber of first words. Inside, a single sentence floated in air, written not in ink, but in breath. Mercy is the fire that does not burn. Ariel read it, then spoke it aloud, and the world changed again. Not in flash, not in doom. But in balance. The deserts bloomed, the seas stilled. The beasts of old returned not to rule, but to roam. The last Ents emerged from slumber. Dwarves heard again the songs of stone. Elves, long departed, whispered on the wind, not with longing, but with joy, and the tower of the last gift began to grow downward. A root, they said, into the fabric of the world itself. Not to dominate, but to anchor. Illyarine wove no more. She sat instead at the veil, waiting. One day, Frodo came. Not in flesh, not in dream, but in wholeness. He stood beside her, calm, radiant, not with power, but with peace. She asked him nothing. He said only, "Thank you for remembering." Then he vanished, not into death, but into the telling. And every child born after spoke his name not with reverence, but with hope. Frodo, the giver, the guide, the one who let go. The world entered a stillness, unlike any before. Not silence, balance. For the first time since the music of the Anor, the story of Arda no longer trembled toward tragedy, because one hobbit, small and broken, had chosen mercy over mastery, and those who followed remembered. And the world remembering became whole. The air lay heavy with a weight of ages untold, and the stars themselves whispered secrets long since forgotten beneath the vast expanse of the timeless sky. In this epoch beyond reckoning, where the echoes of Frodo's mercy wove threads through the very fabric of Arda, the world danced delicately on the precipice of Chanjan awakening that was neither sudden nor violent, but a slow unfurling of light and shadow in balance. The land stretched and shifted beneath the tender gaze of the heavens, and realms, once separated by time and distance, found themselves entwined in harmony's embrace. Mountains that had stood silent for millennia now hummed with the songs of ancient stones, their deep voices blending with the murmurs of newly awakened rivers and the rustle of leaves in forests reborn. The sky shimmered with hues unknown, casting a serene glow upon the earth below, as if the very essence of hope had taken root and blossomed into a radiant tapestry of existence. Within this delicate harmony, the library of the last gift remained a beacon not of power, but of remembrance and renewal. It was no longer a mere structure, but a living, breathing entity, its essence intertwined with the countless stories, memories, and choices that had shaped the course of history. The weavers, those guardians of tale and truth, moved like shadows through its luminous halls, their fingers weaving light and sound into tapestries that pulsed with life. Illyarine, The ageless weaver, whose hands glowed faintly in the dim, now stood at the center of the library's heart. Her gaze was fixed upon the veil of memory, a shimmering portal through which the past and future converged in an eternal dance. Though the centuries had passed like leaves on a river, her purpose remained steadfast: to safeguard the legacy of mercy that Frodo had gifted to the world, and to guide the unfolding of the Age of Echoes toward its destined dawn. As the first light of a new era touched the horizon, a ripple stirred within the veil. From its depths emerged a figure both familiar and transformed, a child born of legend and hope. His name was Erel, the one born of many bloodlines, whose laughter once carried the chime of ancient bells. He had returned, not as a mere mortal, but as a bridge between worlds, an embodiment of memory made manifest. Erel's eyes gleamed with a light that was neither of this world nor beyond it. He moved with a grace that spoke of both freedom and responsibility, and his presence breathed new life into the library's sacred halls. With a voice that resonated like the soft hum of creation itself, he spoke words that echoed through the corridors of time. The story continues, woven anew with threads of mercy and remembrance. Let the song of Arda rise once more, for the world is ready to embrace its true destiny. In response, the library pulsed with vibrant energy, and the weavers gathered round our ale, their voices rising in a chorus that transcended language and form. Together, they wove a new tapestry, one that told of journeys yet to be undertaken, of choices yet to be made, and of the eternal dance between light and shadow that defines the fate of all things. Beyond the walls of the library, the world responded to this awakening. Forests grew thicker and wilder, seas shimmered with newfound clarity, and the creatures of old stirred from their slumber. Elves, long faded into legend, returned not as ghosts but as living witnesses to the dawn of a renewed Middle-earth. Dwarves delved deeper into the heart of mountains, their songs echoing with the joy of rediscovery. Men and hobbits alike felt the stirring of ancient magics, the call to remember and to become more than mere shadows upon the earth. Yet, amidst this blossoming, the Ashen remained a remnant of the old world's desire to forget and unlearn. Their leader, a shadowy figure veiled in mystery, sought to unravel the tapestry of mercy and memory that bound the world together. With whispers of oblivion and the fire of destruction, they waged a subtle war against the light of remembrance, believing that only through forgetting could true freedom be found. The clash between the Order of the Echo and the Ashen became a struggle not of swords and armies, but of stories and wills. The weavers, guided by Illyarine and Derail, faced the darkness with threads of light and song, seeking to mend the frayed edges of the world's memory and to preserve the legacy of Frodo's mercy. As the battle of stories unfolded, ancient powers stirred beneath the earth, and sky forces neither wholly good nor evil, but elemental and vast, awakened by the renewed harmony and conflict. The very fabric of Arda trembled with possibility, and the fate of all who dwelt within it hung in delicate balance. In this grand unfolding, the lines between past, present, and future blurred, and the story of the world became a living thing, forever changing, forever growing, forever guided by the choice of a small hobbit who had once given his greatest burden willingly into another's hands. And so, the Age of Echoes continued, a symphony of light and shadow, memory and mercy, weaving the endless tale of Middle-earth into the dawn of all things yet to come.